It wasn't smooth. It wasn't safe. It was violent, unpredictable, and fast enough to terrify even world champions. When Honda unleashed the NSR500 in 1984, it rewrote what a racing motorcycle could be. 4 cylinders, 2-stroke, and a power band that could launch you forward or throw you into the air. This is the shocking truth behind Honda's most deadly road racer. From NR500 failure to NSR Genesis, Honda didn't step into the 1980s with dominance. It stumbled in, bleeding from a failure that nearly broke its reputation. That failure had a name, NR500. Soichiro Honda believed 4-stroke technology could still win in a world ruled by 2 strokes. His engineers delivered an oval piston V4, an engine that looked like science fiction. Each cylinder carried 8 valves. The rev ceiling was supposed to smash 20,000 RPM, but in practice, it barely produced around 130 horsepower. On paper, it was genius. On the track, it was chaos. The bike was heavy, underpowered, and fragile. At its debut in 1979 at Silverstone, both machines retired before finishing a lap. Spectators laughed. Rivals shook their heads. The NR500 wasn't a weapon, it was a warning. Across its brief life, it delivered 0 wins, sealing its place in history as Honda's humbling. By 1982, Honda swallowed its pride and built a 2-stroke, the NS500. Compact, lighter, and finally competitive. Freddie Spencer wrung victories out of the V3 layout, even clinching the 1983 500cc World Championship. It was redemption, but a partial one. The V3 could win, yet it wasn't a long-term answer. Yamaha and Suzuki still ruled with brutal 4-cylinder 2-strokes. Honda had to escalate. That escalation became the NSR500 project. HRC engineers sketched a new philosophy: 4 cylinders, 2-stroke, 500cc, built to crush the class. If the NR500 was an experiment and the NS500 a stopgap, the NSR500 would be the nuclear option. Inside Honda, the directive was blunt: no more compromise. The NR500 had taught them that engineering cleverness meant nothing if the stopwatch disagreed. The NS500 had shown that lightweight agility could claw back ground. The NSR would fuse those lessons into something terrifying: raw power welded to racing precision. Freddie Spencer, still only in his early 20s, was earmarked as the spearhead. He had the aggression, the reflexes, and the faith in Honda's vision. But even he didn't know what kind of beast was about to be unleashed. The Genesis was complete. Out of humiliation came resolve. Out of a failed 4-stroke came a 2-stroke weapon that would soon define an era. NV0A, the radical upside-down experiment. When Honda finally unveiled the NSR500 in 1984, it didn't look like any other motorcycle on the grid. Engineers at HRC weren't just chasing horsepower. They were chasing physics itself. The result was codenamed NV0A, and it was radical. The design flipped convention on its head. Literally. Fuel tank under the engine. Expansion chambers and exhaust pipes routed over the top. The idea was bold: lower the center of gravity, reduce wheelies, and feed mass forward into the chassis. If wheelies stole tenths down the straight, this bike promised to kill them. On paper, it was beautiful. On track, it was volatile. Freddie Spencer, fresh off his 1983 World Championship, was expected to make the NSR sing. Instead, he wrestled with it. The bike felt alien. Its low-mounted fuel tank sat beneath the engine, while the exhaust heat rising under the seat baked the rider. Engineers loved the theory. Riders hated the reality. Early NV0A prototypes produced only about 140 horsepower from their V4 2-stroke layout, defined above all by the radical choice to place the fuel tank beneath the engine. Even when the bike screamed, it didn't settle. Acceleration was explosive, but mid-corner stability evaporated. Spencer found himself sliding wide, fighting input delays, chasing grip that wasn't there. He described the experience as unnatural, and that was the problem. NV0A wasn't a motorcycle. It was an experiment pretending to be one. By mid-season, Spencer abandoned it. He reverted to the older NS500 triple for consistency. The NV0A was shelved, not scrapped, but treated like a lab project gone too far. For Honda, it was déjà vu. Just as the NR500 had failed by pushing too far too fast, the NV0A proved that radical ideas without rider confidence were doomed. Still, the failure wasn't wasted. The upside-down layout taught Honda hard lessons about weight distribution, cooling, and rider ergonomics. The NSR500 would survive, but its first incarnation, the NV0A, was a reminder that even the deadliest weapons can misfire. What began as a revolution entered the record books as a stumble. Yet buried inside that stumble were the seeds of domination. Engineering evolution, Screamer versus Big Bang. After the NV0A's awkward debut, Honda regrouped. The 1985 NSR500 arrived leaner, sharper, and finally dangerous in the way Honda had promised. Gone was the under-engine tank experiment. In its place came a conventional but perfected layout. A V4 two-stroke wrapped in a twin-spar aluminum frame. It looked familiar. It rode like nothing else. The new NSR delivered power like a hammer. Its Screamer firing order lit all 4 cylinders at even intervals, creating a relentless rush from the crank. Peak output pushed well past 150 horsepower, climbing toward nearly 180 as development advanced. And at around 12,000 RPM, the 499cc V4 two-stroke sounded like a chainsaw storm, a mechanical banshee ripping down straights. But the Screamer had teeth. Its delivery was violent, a razor-thin power band that snapped open without mercy. Riders described opening the throttle as a gamble. You either rocketed forward, or you high-sided into orbit. For experts like Freddie Spencer or Eddie Lawson, it was manageable. For others, it was a career-ender. By 1992, Honda sought a cure. Engineers unveiled a new firing order, the Big Bang. Instead of even pulses, the cylinders fired in close bursts, clumping combustion together. The result? The same peak horsepower, but with a wider, more predictable grip window. The rear tire hooked up instead of spinning wildly. Suddenly, the NSR didn't just scare riders, it empowered them. Mick Doohan was the ultimate beneficiary. With the Big Bang configuration, he carved through the 1994 season and began a reign that would stretch 5 consecutive championships. He later admitted the difference was night and day. It felt like the bike finally gave back what I put in. And yet, Honda's philosophy wasn't static. In 1997, after years of refinement, Doohan demanded a return to the Screamer. Electronics and chassis improvements had caught up. He wanted maximum aggression, and the team delivered. The risk was back, but so was the edge. He dominated anyway. Alongside ignition experiments, Honda tested fuel injection, water cooling tricks, even quick shifters years ahead of their time. Each step turned the NSR500 into not just a motorcycle, but a laboratory of controlled violence. Through the late 1980s and 1990s, the NSR wasn't simply evolving, it was teaching. It proved that the deadliest weapons aren't just built once. They're sharpened, dulled, and sharpened again, until only the rider's courage limits the outcome. Glory and domination. Champions of the NSR500. The NSR500 didn't just win races, it forged champions. From the mid-1980s to the dawn of MotoGP, the bike was the benchmark, the monster every rival measured against. Freddie Spencer was the first to stamp its authority. In 1985, he accomplished what no one has repeated since, winning both the 250cc and 500cc World Championships in the same year. His NSR roared across continents, proof that Honda's gamble on the V4 had paid off. Wayne Gardner followed in 1987. The Australian rode the NSR500 with grit, taming its high sides and violence to deliver Honda its next crown. His victory confirmed the bike wasn't a one-off wonder, it was a dynasty in motion. In 1989, Eddie Lawson left Yamaha, climbed aboard the NSR, and immediately won the title. It was betrayal in the paddock, vindication on the track. The message was clear. If you wanted to be champion, you rode the Honda. Then came Mick Doohan. From 1994 to 1998, he ruled with 5 consecutive championships, a streak that elevated both rider and machine into legend. Doohan's iron will, fused with the NSR's evolving power. Big Bang or Screamer, it didn't matter. Together, they crushed the field. By the late 1990s, the NSR had become a rite of passage. Alex Crivellet took the 1999 title, becoming the first Spaniard to be crowned in the premier class. And in 2001, a young Valentino Rossi closed the book with one final championship before the four-stroke era began. Statistics told the same story. More than 100 Grand Prix victories, 10 Riders' Championships, and 13 Constructors' titles. By the late 1990s, the NSR500's V4 two-stroke was producing over 180 horsepower. And it wasn't just fast, it was selective. It gave glory only to those who had the nerve to master it. And for those few who did, it delivered dynasties. Deadly reputation. Why riders feared it. To call the NSR500 fast was an understatement. To call it deadly was closer to the truth. Its reputation wasn't built on statistics alone. It was built on the scars it left behind. The core of the fear was the power band. Below 9,000 RPM, the engine felt tame, almost lazy. Cross that threshold, and it detonated. The rear tire lit up, grip vanished, and the rider's fate balanced on a razor edge. One heartbeat late on throttle, and the bike would spit you skyward in a violent high side. High sides weren't accidents, they were catapults. Riders were flung into the air, landing with bones shattered and seasons lost. Wayne Gardner once described the NSR as a rocket with a trapdoor under the seat. It was praise and warning in one. Mick Doohan suffered the most infamous example. In 1992, at the Dutch TT in Assen, he high-sided and crushed his leg so badly that doctors nearly amputated. He survived, but his right foot was ruined. To keep racing, Doohan and Honda's engineers created a thumb-operated rear brake lever, a desperate innovation born from the NSR's brutality. That lever became his trademark, proof that survival demanded adaptation. The brutality came from the bike's savage power band, with horsepower erupting suddenly in a narrow rev range that felt less like acceleration and more like detonation. That violence shattered bones as easily as it shattered lap records. Collarbones, legs, wrists were common casualties. Rookies in particular feared it. The NSR was merciless to anyone without absolute throttle discipline. It rewarded champions and punished learners. Journalists didn't need much imagination to christen it the Rookie Killer, a nickname earned for the careers it ended before they began. Even Valentino Rossi, who mastered the NSR in 2001, admitted it scared him. It was violent, very violent. But if you respected it, you could fly. That was the paradox. The same machine that terrified could also elevate a rider into legend. The NSR500 was not just a motorcycle. It was a test of nerve, a rolling gamble where bravery met physics. And more often than not, physics won. Rivals in the arms race, Yamaha YZR500 and Suzuki RGV500. The NSR500's supremacy was shaped by the world around it. It was born into an arms race where Yamaha and Suzuki brought their own weapons to the grid. Yamaha's answer was the YZR500. With its V4 two-stroke and twin-crank design, it delivered smoother power and more forgiving handling. Riders like Wayne Rainey exploited that balance to perfection, stringing together 3 consecutive championships in the early 1990s. The YZR didn't terrify like the NSR, it seduced with stability. Suzuki fielded the RGV500, a sharp-edged machine that thrived under Kevin Schwantz's aggressive style. Its hallmark was agility. Light, flickable, and razor-sharp, it excelled in dogfights where precision trumped raw power. In 1993, Schwantz used it to snatch the World Championship, proving that Suzuki's underdog still had bite. And yet, when the dust settled, Honda's NSR500 towered above them both. Its power was brutal, its learning curve savage, but once mastered, it was unbeatable. Riders who switched over often remarked that the NSR felt like moving from a sword to a cannon. The numbers confirmed it. While Yamaha and Suzuki traded titles, Honda stacked them. 10 Riders' Championships by the time the two-stroke era ended. By the late 1990s, the NSR500 produced well over 180 horsepower. while Yamaha's YZR500 was closer to 170, and Suzuki's RGV 500 hovered near 165. The rival machines each had virtues. Yamaha's YZR was the surgeon's scalpel, Suzuki's RGV, the duelist's blade. But the NSR500 was a warhammer, harder to lift, harder to wield, but devastating in the hands of a master. By the late 1990s, the paddock knew the truth. To beat Honda, you needed luck, rain, or disaster. Otherwise, the NSR decided the race before the lights even went out. Legacy of a two-stroke titan. By 2002, the world had changed. The FIM rewrote the rules, opening MotoGP to four-stroke 990cc monsters. The two-stroke era, the kingdom the NSR500 had ruled for nearly 2 decades, was over. Honda responded with the RC211V, a 5-cylinder four-stroke. It won instantly. But even as the new bike carried Honda forward, the shadow of the NSR lingered. The NSR500 left with numbers no rival could touch. 10 Riders' Championships, more than 100 Grand Prix wins, 13 Constructors' titles. It was a resume that transformed Honda from underdog experimenter to undisputed king of Grand Prix racing. But its legacy wasn't just hardware, it was lessons. The Big Bang ignition carried into modern MotoGP bikes. The twin-spar frame architecture became the template for racing chassis. Even doohan's thumb brake, born of injury, became a standard tool for riders who needed extra control. Every modern MotoGP machine still whispers traces of the NSR's DNA. Collectors know it too. Surviving NSR 500s rarely change hands, but when they do, the numbers are staggering. In 2018, a factory machine sold for more than $260,000 at auction. At Honda's collection hall in Motegi, the bike sits like an artifact of violence, sleek, small, and terrifyingly purposeful. Fans crowd around it not just to see a motorcycle, but to glimpse the monster that defined an age. Even Valentino Rossi, who closed the NSR's book with the 2001 title, still speaks of it with reverence. It was wild. But when you learned its language, nothing was faster. The NSR 500 story didn't end in 2002. It lives in echoes. Every time a MotoGP bike squats under acceleration, every time a rear tire lights up, every time a rider wrestles with physics. The Titan is gone, but its ghost still rules the track. The deadly echo of Honda's monster. Every legend leaves an echo. The NSR 500's echo is not gentle, it is violent, metallic, a scream that refuses to fade. From its first unstable lapse in 1984 to its final world title in 2001, the NSR 500 defined what it meant to risk everything for speed. Other bikes were fast, other bikes won championships, but no other machine combined terror and triumph in the same heartbeat. Riders feared it and loved it, often in the same corner. They strapped themselves onto 180 horsepower of two-stroke fury, knowing it could crown them a champion, or fling them into the gravel in a flash of shattered fiberglass. That duality became its identity. The NSR 500 wasn't simply Honda's weapon, it was a mirror. It showed riders exactly who they were, brave enough, skilled enough, or not. Mick Doohan turned it into 5 straight titles. Valentino Rossi tamed it as a rookie and closed the two-stroke era with a final flourish. Countless others tried and failed, leaving only scars as their testimony. For Honda, the NSR 500 was more than a bike. It was redemption from the humiliation of the NR 500, proof that stubborn vision could be reborn as dominance. It was a laboratory on wheels, spawning innovations that reshaped MotoGP long after the last two-stroke was silenced. And for fans, it was theater. The sound, the smoke, the violence of its power band. It wasn't just racing, it was spectacle. Even today, at historic exhibitions, when an NSR 500 coughs into life and screams down the straight, the ground shakes. People stop breathing. The echo returns. But the echo is more than sound. It's an invitation to remember a time when racing was raw, unforgiving, and stripped of electronic safety nets. When bravery and throttle control decided everything. The NSR 500 was the test. Few passed. Those who did became immortal. Across its life, it produced more than 180 horsepower, delivered 10 world titles, and left behind a legacy that feels unkillable. This is two-wheel engines. The NSR500 was Honda's deadliest masterpiece, a monster that demanded fear, respect, and absolute commitment. If you want more stories of the machines that defined Honda's history, subscribe. Because here, every engine has a soul, and every soul leaves an echo.